everyone, to a Sunday night edition of Accessibly Live, the book club reading room. How you doing tonight? I got a request for the show tonight. I was walking across Duluth campus this afternoon, and I had a couple people stop and say they liked watching the Nosferatu and um, the other movie last week, the weekend before um, Metropolis. And I was glad. I'm glad you guys are enjoying the movies and enjoying watching the show. I know that once in a while the books can be really good, and I try to give you guys as much as possible. Remember, this show was started on the premise of going against the people who want to ban and burn books. Because there's a lot of stupid people out there, guys, and they want to ban and take away the books that I'm reading here and telling you that you can't read it. Mysterious Stranger by Mark Twain, Scarlet Letter, books like that they don't think you should be reading. But hey, that's fine. I'll read it to you. And that's what I like doing, and that's what I want to do for you. And throw in a few movies, few fun public domain movies, because that's what this show is all about, public domain. Books and movies that are available for me to share with you. Tonight, we're going to finish up. Today, this is November 2nd. This is All Souls Day. If you're part of the Catholic Christian ideology, the last 2 days after Halloween has been All Saints Day and All Souls Day. And since I couldn't do a show yesterday, which is All Saints Day, what I'm going to do is do one on All Souls Day. Now, we've talked about it last Thursday, Coco, the Disney movie, which was a lot of fun. If you guys haven't seen Coco, please go rent it, watch it. It is a lot of fun. In fact, I got a call this afternoon from my executive producer asking if I wanted to come over and watch Coco tonight. And I'm going, no, I got the show tonight. She goes, oh yeah, that's right. For those of us who did remember to set our clocks back, hope you guys had a non-eventful, stress-less day and not remembering to race early somewhere where you didn't have to be there early. If you guys get a chance, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us out in the algorithm here on YouTube and in Twitch a whole lot. It helps us out. There's been a lot of problems going on with the algorithm going on, that people who like and subscribe aren't staying like and subscribed, and I appreciate everyone who does that here. Appreciate you, everybody who watches the show, comes in, has Joel, reading to you guys on various occasions. I don't know if I mentioned a couple weeks ago, we had a big announcement that January 27th, 28th, which is the anniversary, the 3rd year anniversary of the book club reading room, we've got something special planned for you guys. Starting January 1st, it will be the first year that the legendary mystery young adults book, Nancy Drew, is available. And we will be reading the first of the Nancy Drew books, and I believe it's When the Clock Told. And kind of excited to read that. Something different for everybody. Yes, we will read later on in the year, we will read a Hardy Boys. Kind of excited by that. But tonight we have got some haunted tales. The last to wrap up the Halloween season on All Souls Night, and a couple interesting quick tales to send a shiver down your spine. Couple fun ones. First one is the dead woman's photograph. The second, the ghost of a live man. The third, the ghost of Washington, as opposed to Lincoln. But let's get started with the dead woman's photograph. Here on Accessibly Live, the book club reading room. Virgil Hoyt is a photographer's assistant up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and is a man of good deal of taste. He has been in search of the picturesque all over the West and hundreds of miles to the north in Canada, and can speak 3 or 4 Indian dialects and put a canoe in the rapids. That is to say, he is a man of adventurous sort and no dreamer. He can fight well and shoot well and swim well enough to put up a winning race with anyone, and he can sit all day in a saddle and not dream about it at night. Think about that one, guys. Wherever he goes, he uses a camera. The world, Hoyt is in habit of saying to those who sit with him when he has his pipe in hand, was created in 6 days to be photographed. Man, and especially woman, was made for the same purpose. Clouds are not made to give moisture, nor trees to cast shade. They were created for the photographer. In short, Virgil Hoyt's view of the world is whimsical, and he doesn't like to be bothered with anything disagreeable. That is the reason that he loathes and detests going to a house of mourning to photograph a corpse. A horrible bad taste of it offends him partially, and partially he is annoyed at having to shoulder, even for few moments, a part of someone's burden of sorrow. He doesn't like sorrow, and would willingly canoe 500 miles up the cold Canadian rivers to get rid of it. Nevertheless, as an assistant photographer, it is often his duty to do this very kind thing. Not long ago, he was sent for a rich family of St. Paul to photograph the mother who had just died. He was very much put out, but went. He went to the front parlor where the dead woman lay in her coffin. It was evident that there was some excitement in the household and that a discussion was going on, but Hoyt wasn't concerned, so he paid no attention to the matter. The daughter wanted the coffin turned on end in order that the corpse might face the camera properly. But Hoyt said that would overcome the recumbent attitude and make it appear that the face was taken in the position it would naturally hold in life. So they went out and left him alone with the dead. The face was a strong and positive one, such may have been often seen among many Judean matrons. Hoyt regarded it with some admiration, thinking to himself that she was a woman who has been used of having her own way. There was a strand of hair out of place, and he pushed it back from her brow. A bud lifted its head too high from among the roses on her chest and spoiled the contour of her chin, so he broke it off. He remembered these things later very distinctly, that his hand touched her face 2 or 3 times. Then he took the photographs and left the house. He was very busy at the time, and several days lapsed before he was able to develop the plates. He took them from the bath in which they had lain with number of others, and he went to work on them. There were 3 plates, he having to take number merely as a precaution against an accident. They came up very well, but as they developed, he became aware of the existence of something in the photograph which he had not been apparent to his eye. The mysterious always came under the head of the disagreeable with him, and there was therefore to be banished. And he made only a few prints and put the things away out of sight. He hoped that something would intervene to save him from attempting an explanation. But it was part of the general perplexity of life that things do not intervene as they ought, and when they ought. So one day his employer asked him what had become of those photographs. He tried to evade him, but it was futile, and he got out of the finished photographs and showed them to him. The older man sat staring at them a long time. "Hoyt," he said at length, "you are a young man, and I suppose you have never seen anything like this before." "But I have." "Not exactly the same thing, but a similar phenomenon have come my way a number of times since I went into the business, and I wanted to tell you there are things in heaven and earth not dreamt of." "Oh, I know all that tommy rot," cried Hoyt angrily. "But when anything happens, I want to know the reason why and how it is done." "All right," said his employer. "Then you might explain why and how the sun rises." But he humored the young man sufficiently to examine with him the bath in which the plates were submerged, and the plates themselves. All was as it should be, but the mystery was there and could not be done away with. Hoyt hoped against hope that the friends of the dead woman would somehow forget about the photographs, but of course the wish was unreasonable, and one day the daughter appeared and asked to see the photographs of her mother. "Well, to tell you the truth," stammered Hoyt, "those didn't come out as well as I wish." "But let me see them," persisted the lady. "I would like to see them anyway." "Well, now," said Hoyt, trying to be soothing, as he believed it was always best to be soothing. To tell the truth, he was ignoramus where women were concerned. "I think it would be better if you didn't see them. There are reasons why." He ambled on like this, stupid man as he was, and of course the woman said she would see those pictures without further delay. Poor Hoyt brought them out and placed them in her hand, and then ran for a water pitcher, and had to be bothered of bathing her forehead to keep her from fainting. For what the woman saw was this: over the face and the flowers and the head of the coffin fell a thick veil, the edges of which touched the floor in some places. It covered the features so well that there not a hint of them was visible. "There was nothing over my mother's face," cried the lady at length. "Not a thing," acquiesced Hoyt. "I know, because I had occasion to touch her face just before I took the picture. I had to put some of her hair back in from her brow." "What does this mean, then?" asked the lady. "You know better than I. There is no explanation in science. Perhaps there is some in psychology." "Well," said the lady, stammering a little and coloring, "mother was a good woman, but she always wanted her own way, and she always had it too." "Yes?" "She never would have taken her picture had her she never would have had her picture taken. She didn't admire herself. She said no one should ever see a picture of hers." "So," said Hoyt meditatively, "well, she's kept her word, hasn't she?" The two stood looking at the pictures for a time. Then Hoyt pointed to the open blaze in the grate. "Throw them in," he commanded. "Don't let your father see them. Don't keep them yourself. They would be they wouldn't be good things to keep. That's true enough, said the lady slowly, and she threw them in the fire. Then Virgil Hoyt brought out the plates and broke them before her eyes. And that was the end of it, except that Hoyt sometimes tells the story to those who sit behind him when he lights his pipe. The end of the first story. The second, the ghost of a live man. We were in South Atlantic Ocean, in the latitude of an island of Fernando Noronha, about 40 degrees 12 minutes south, on the border of on board the Baroque H.G. Johnson, homeward bound from Australia. I was the only passenger, and we were safely around Cape Horn, with the barometer at 28 degrees 18 minutes, and yet somehow miraculously escaped any extremely heavy gale. Had lightly northerly and easterly winds until we reached 20 degrees, and hence the southeast trades were sending us fast on our way to the equator. I sat on deck, smoking my pipe, with a glorious full moon shedding its bright pathway across the blue waters, and chatting with the first mate, a man some 58 years or more. He had been mate and or captain of many and varied experiences he could relate. A thorough sailor and skillful navigator, he was honest as the day was long, had a heart as big as an ox, and was all round good fellow and genial companion. Some of his yarns might be taken as como gran salis, yet he always positively assured me that he was telling me the truth. An account of a voyage that he had made in a whaler from the Southern Ocean to New Bedford seemed to be worthy to be repeated. He had rounded Cape Horn 6 times and Cape of Good Hope 26 times, besides making many trips across the Western Ocean and to South American ports. I gave his account as near as possible to his own words. It was in 1871, and I was in command of the whaler Mary Jane. We had been out from home over 3 years, and had been on board a full cargo of whale oil, besides 2,000 pounds of whalebone, which was then worth $5 per pound. I also had been fortunate enough to find a dead whale, which we came across a large quantity of ambergris, and our hearts were all very light as we began our homeward voyage, and through our hearts all tended to be a hearty welcome which we should receive from wives and sweethearts when we reached our journey's end. Many a night, as I lay in my berth, I had the thought of great pleasure to the amount of money that would be coming to me from the proceeds from our voyage when we arrived in New Bedford. I calculated that I made not $12,000 as my share of the proceeds of the whalebone and oil, to say nothing of the ambergris, which I well knew would bring at least $20,000, and one half of which belonged to me. You can therefore imagine that I was pleased with myself as we went bounding along through the southwest trades. We crossed the equator in longitude 36, and soon after we took strong northeast trades, and all was going well as I could wish. We had put the ship in perfect order, painted her insides and out, and you would never have recognized her as an old whaling ship that had been for 3 years been plying the South Oceans for whales. Never have I forgot that an old bull whale that we tackled about 2 degrees to the south of Cape Horn. But that is another story, which I will give you another time. We had just lost the Northeast trades, and we were entering the Gulf Stream. I sat in my cabin with my chart on my table. Before we rolled up, I had just picked up the location on it, and was thinking that in a week or more I would be home, surrounded by those near and dear to me, and relating to them the story of my great good fortune. It was always my custom to work up my latitude and longitude about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then after supper pick up her position on the chart, have a smoke, perhaps just before retiring a nip of grog, and then at 8:30 o'clock, as regular as a clock, I would turn in. I am a great smoker, and these days I have been smoking all the afternoons, besides having 2 or 3 nips. Having a drink. We had a dog on board who we called Bosun, who had been out with us on all our voyages, and who was afraid of nothing. He had endeared himself to every man on board, and when Bosun took water, something near serious was in the wind. This night, as I was in the cabin, I heard a most dismal howl from Bosun, and called out to the mate to know what was the matter with the dog. He replied that he reckoned some of the men might have been teasing him, and the occurrence soon passed from my mind. Suddenly, I saw someone coming down after the companionway way in the cabin. I supposed at first it was the mate, and wondered that he had not first spoken to me. But then I noticed that he wore clothes I had never seen on a mate. As he advanced into the cabin, I saw his face. It was the face of a man I had never seen in my life. He was thin and pale and haggard, and was advanced. He looked about the cabin and at the rolled up chart on the table. There seemed to be a pall in his eye, and then there swept over his face a look of intense disappointment, and before I could move or speak, he had vanished from my sight. Now, I am a very particular man, and I at once straightened myself in my chair and said to myself, "Well, old man, you had smoked one too many pipes today, or else you had one drink too much, for you had been asleep in your chair and seen a ghost." And I was quite satisfied that I had dreamed, especially as I called to the mate and asked him if he had seen anyone come below. He said no, that he had not left the deck for an hour, and the man at the wheel directly in front of the door was sure no one had entered the cabin. So I convinced myself that I had a very vivid dream, though I could not help thinking of the matter all through the next day. At 8 o'clock the next evening, as I sat in the same place in my work, just as I finished the chart lying rolled up on the table before me, when suddenly the dog's dismal howl rang through the ship, and looking up, I saw those same leg coming towards me after my companion. My hair fairly stood on end, and yet today surely I was wide awake. I had only smoked one pipe all day, and not had touch of a drop of liquor. The same man, emaciated figure, came into the cabin, glanced inquiringly and appealingly at me, and again there spread over his face that look of utter disappointment, as if he had sought something and failed it, and again he disappeared. I rushed down the deck to the mate, and told him all I had seen during the last 2 nights, and he made light of it, and assured me that I had been asleep or smoking too much. He did not like to suggest that I had been drinking. Still, I could see that the thought that came to his mind was, the old man has seen him again. I give up trying to convince him, but request the next night from 8 to 8:30 he should sit in the cabin with me. How the next day passed I cannot tell. I only know that my thoughts never left that ghostly visit, and somehow I felt that the evening would reveal something to me and spell be broken. I made up my mind I would speak to the thing, whatever it was, and I felt a sort of security in the presence of a mate who was daring fellow and feared neither man or the devil. Neither rum nor tobacco passed my lips during the next day, and 8 o'clock found the mate and I sitting in the cabin, and this time the chart lay open on the table beside us. Just as 8 bells struck, the dog's premonitory wail sounded, and looking up, we both saw the figure descending the cabin stairs. We both seemed frozen to our seats, and the strange weirdness of the whole proceeding cast the spell over the mate and me alike, and we were both unable to move or speak. Slowly the figure proceeded to the cabin and glanced around without a word, but with the same expectant look on his face. His form was that even more wasted, his cheeks sunken, and his eyes seemed almost out of sight, so deeply they were set in their sockets. As his eyes fell upon the open chart, a look of supreme joy fairly irradiated his features, and advancing to the table, he placed one long, bony figure on the chart, and held it for a moment, and then again disappeared from our sight. For 5 minutes after he had left us, we sat speechless. Then I managed to say, "What do you think of that, Mr. Morris?" "My God, sir, I don't know. It's beyond me." Then my eyes fell upon the open chart, and where his finger had been was a tiny spot of blood exactly on the point of longitude 63 degrees west and latitude 37 degrees north. We were then only about 50 miles distant from that position, and immediately there came to me the determination to steer the ship there. So I laid their course accordingly, and pointed a lookout to the crow's nest. At 5 o'clock in the morning, just as the east began to grow gray, the lookout called out, "Boat on the lee bow!" And we just came up to it and found 4 men in it, 3 dead, and one with just a remnant of life left in him. We sewed the 3 bodies in canvas and buried them at sea, and then gave all our attention to restoring life to the poor emaciated frame, which I then recognized was the very man who, for the last 3 consecutive nights, had visited me in my cabin. By judicious and careful nursing life practically into him, and in 4 days he was able to sit up and talk with me in the cabin. It seems he commanded the ship Promise, and she had taken fire and been destroyed, with all hands to take to the boats. 10 were in the first of the boats at first, but their food had given out, and one by one he had seen them die, and one by one he had cast bodies overboard. Finally he lost consciousness, and knew not whether his 3 remaining companions were dead or alive. Then he said he seemed in a dream to see a ship, and tried to go to her for help, but just as he was going on board of trying to see, it would seem to keep him back. 3 times in his dreams he tried to visit this ship, and the last time there seemed to come to him a certain satisfaction, and he felt that he had succeeded in his object. Turning to my table, he said, "Let me take your chart. I'll show you just where we were." "Stop," I said. "Don't take the chart. It is an old one and all marked over. Mark your position on this new one." He took my pencil and knife and carefully sharpened the pencil. Then, taking my dividers, he measured his latitude and longitude and placed a pencil dot at the point on the clean chart. As he lifted his hand, he said, "Oh, excuse me, Captain. I cut my finger in sharpening the pencil, and I've left a drop of blood on the chart." "Never mind," said I. "Leave it there." Then I produced the old chart, and there, in the exactly same corresponding place, was the drop of blood left by my ghostly visitor. Then, looking steadily into my face, the mate solemnly added, "I cannot explain this, sir. Perhaps you can, but I can tell you on my honor it is God's own truth that I have told you." The end. It was a good story. I liked a good ghost story like that. Keeps you on your toes. Finally, our last ghost story on All Souls Night, Sunday, November 3rd, 2025. The Ghost of Washington. It was early on Christmas morning when John Riley wheeled away from the picturesque little village where he had passed a previous night, continue his cycling tour through eastern Pennsylvania. Today, his intention was to stop at Valley Forge and then to ride up the Schuylkill Valley, visiting in turn all points of historical interest that lay on his route. Valley Forge, his road map indicated, was but a short distance further. All around him were the hills and fields and roads over which Washington and his half-starved army had foraged and roamed throughout the trying winter of 1777 through 1778, 126 years ago. It was a beautiful Christmas day, truly, and as he wheeled along, young Riley's thoughts were almost equally divided between the surrounding pleasant scenery and the folks at home who he knew very well were assembling at just the present time around a heavily laden Christmas tree in the parlor. The sun rose higher and higher, and Riley pedaled on down the valley, passing every now and then quite pleasant-looking farmhouses, many of which, no doubt, had been built anterior to the period which had given vicinity its history. Arriving finally at the place which the road forked off in two directions, Riley was puzzled which way to go on. There happened to be a dwelling close by. Accordingly, he dismounted, left his wheel leaning against a gated post at the side of the road, and walked up a wretched flanked walk leading to the house, with the idea of getting instructions from its inmates. Situated in the center of an unkept field of rank grass and weeds, the building lay back from the highway probably 150 feet. There was long and low in shape, containing one story and having what is termed a gabled roof, under which there had been an attic of no mean size. On coming close to the house, a fact Riley had not noticed from the road became plainly evident. It was deserted. He saw that the roof and the side shingles were in wretched condition, that the window sashes and frames, as well as the doors on the door frames, were missing from an opening in the side walls, where once there had been, and the entire side of the house, including part of the stone foundation, which shone above the ground, was full of cracks and seams. At first, on the point of turning back, he concluded to see what the interior was like anyway. Accordingly, he went inside. Glancing around the large, dust filled room he had entered, his gaze at first failed to locate any object of interest. A rickety appearing set of steps went up to the attic from one side of the apartment, and over in one corner was a large open fireplace, from the walls of which much of the brickwork had become loosened and falling out. Riley had started up the steps towards the attic, when happening to look back for an instant, his attention was attracted to a singular looking jug shaped bottle no larger than a vinegar cruet, which was laying on its side on the her on the hearth of the fireplace, partially covered up by debris of loose bricks and mortar. He hastened back down the steps and crossed the room, taking the bottle up in his hand and examining it with curiosity. Being partially filled with liquid of some kind or another, the bottle was very soon uncorked and held under the young man's nose. The liquid gave forth a peculiar, pungent, and inviting odor. Without further hesitation, Riley's lips sought the neck of the bottle. It was hardly possible to describe the pleasure and satisfaction his senses experienced as he drank. When the fluid was still gurgling down his throat, a heavy hand was placed most suddenly on his shoulder, and his body was given a violent shaking. The bottle fell to the ground and broken into 100 pieces. "Hello," said a rough voice almost in Riley's ears. "Who are you, anyway? And why are you doing within the lines?" "A spy, I'll be bound." As most assuredly there had been no one else in the vicinity of the building when he had entered it, and with equal certainty no one had come down the steps from the attic. Riley was naturally surprised and mystified by this unexpected assault. He struggled instinctively to break loose from the unfriendly grasp, and when he finally succeeded, he twisted his body around so that he could face across the room. Immediately, he made the remarkable discovery that there were 4 other persons in the apartment, 3 uncouth-looking fellows habited in fantastic but ragged garments, and a matronly-looking woman, the latter standing over a washtub which had been elevated upon 2 chairs in a corner near the fireplace. To all the appearance, the woman had been busy at her work, and had stopped for a moment to see what the men were doing too. Her waist sleeves were rolled up her shoulders, and her arms dripped with water and soapsuds. Over the tops of the tubs, partially filled with water, were visibly the edges of several well-soaked fabrics. To add to his astonishment, he noticed that in the chimney place, which a moment before was falling apart, but now seemed to be clean and in good condition, a cheerful fire burned, and that above the flames was suspended an iron pot from which issued a jets of steam. He noticed also that the entire appearance of the room had undergone a great change. Everything seemed to be in good repair, tidy and neat, the ceilings and the walls and the doors, even the stairway leading to the attic. The opening in the walls were fitted with window sashes and well-painted doors. The apartment had, in fact, evolved under his own eyesight from a state of absolute ruin into an excellent preservation. Of all the seemed so weird and uncanny that Riley stood for a moment or two in the transformed apartment, utterly dumbfounded. His mouth wide open, and his eyes all but popping out of his head. He was brought to his senses by the fellow who had shaken him, growling out, "Come, explain yourself." An explanation is due to me, Riley managed to gasp. "Don't bandy words with the rascal, Harry," said one of the other men spoke up. "Bring him along to headquarters." Thereupon, without further parley, the three men marched Riley in military fashion to the open air and down the road. Here he picked up at the gate his bicycle, which they unstacked a group of three old-fashioned looking muskets located close by. When the young man had entered the house a few minutes before, this stack of arms had not been there. He could not understand it. Neither could he understand, on looking back at the building as he marched off down the road, the mysterious agency had transformed its dilapidated exterior, just as it had been interior, into practically new condition. While they trudged along, the strangers exhibited a singular interest in the wheel Riley pushed at his side. Running their coarse hands over the frame and handlebars, they acted on the whole as they were never seen a bicycle. This in itself was rather another surprise. He had hardly supposed that there were three men in the country so totally unacquainted with what was familiar piece of mechanism everywhere. At the same time that they were paying much attention to the wheel, Riley in turn was studying with great curiosity his singular looking captors. Rough, unprepossessing appearing fellows they were, large of frame and unshaven, and at most must have added dirty face. What remained of their very ragged clothing, he had already noticed, was of most remarkable cut and design, resembling closely the garments worn by the Continental militiamen in the War of Independence. The hats were broad, low of the crown, three corners in shape, the trousers were buff-colored, and the end of the knees, and the long, blue spike-tailed coats flapped under the extremities of the tails, the flaps being fastened down with good-sized brass buttons. The leather leggings were strapped around the cowhide boots, through the badly worn feet of each, in which placed the leather had cracked open. The flesh, unprotected by stockings, could be seen. Dressed as he was, in a cleanly gray cycling costume, Riley's appearance most assuredly was strongly in contrast to those of his companions. After a brisk walk of 20 minutes, during which they occasionally met and passed one or two other groups of men clothed and outfitted like Riley's escorts, the little party followed up the road a slight incline and around a well-wooded bend to the left, coming quite suddenly and to captive, very unexpectedly, to what was without a doubt a military encampment. And village, in fact, composed of many rows of small log huts. Along the streets, between the buildings, muskets were stacked in hundreds of places. Over in one corner, on a slight eminence commanding of the road which they had come, a cleverly hidden from behind the trees and the shrubbery, the young man noticed a battery of field pieces. Wherever the eye was turned on this singular scene were countless numbers of soldiers, all garmented in three-cornered hats, spike-tailed coats, and knee breeches, walking lazily hither and thither, grouped around crackling fires, or parading up and down the streets in platoons under the guidance of ragged but stern-looking officers. Harry stopped the little procession in four in front of one of the larger log houses. Then, while stood there, the long blast from a bugle was heard, followed by the roll of drums. A minute or two afterward, several companies of militia marched up and grounded their arms, forming three sides of the long square round them, the fourth an open side towards the log house. Directly succeeding this maneuver, there came through the doorway of the house, stepped up the center of the square, stopping squarely in front of Riley, a dignified-looking person, tall and straight, with splendidly proportioned of figure, and having the face of great nobility and character. The cold chill chased one another down Riley's back. His limbs swayed and tottered beneath his weight. He never experienced another sensation of mingled astonishment and fright. He was in the presence of General Washington. Not a phantom Washington, either, but Washington in the flesh and blood, as material and earthly as being ever crossed a person's line of vision. Riley, in his time, had seen so many portraits, marble busts, statues of the great commander, it could not be mistaken. Recovering the use of his faculties, for which the moment seemed to be lost, Riley did the very commonplace thing that others before him would have done when placed unexpectedly in a remarkable situation. He pinched himself in front of. He felt like pinching the figure in front of him also, but he could not muster up the courage to do it. He stood there trying to think it all out, and his thoughts became less stagnant. His fright dissolved under the process of reasoning his mind pursued. To reason a thing out, even though an explanation can only be obtained by leaving much of the subject unaccounted for, tends to make one bolder and less shaky in the knees. The series of strange incidents which he was experiencing had been inaugurated in old-fashioned dwelling he had visited after information concerning roads, and everywhere had been going along in a perfectly normal way up to the very moment when he had taken a drink from the bottle found in the fireplace. But from that precise time, everything had gone wrongly. Hence, the inference that the drinking of the particular liquid was accountable in some way or another for his troubles. There was a supernatural agency in the whole thing. That much he had to admit. And whatever that agency was, and however it might be accounted for, it had taken Riley back into the period of time more than 100 years ago. It landed him, body and soul, within the lines of the Patriot forces wintering at Valley Forge. He might have been there, turning over and over in his mind, pinching himself and muttering all morning, had not the newcomer ceased a silent but curious inspection of his person, and asked, "Who are you, sir?" "John Riley, at your pleasure," the young man replied, adding a question on his own account. "And who are you, sir?" Immediately he received a heavy thump on his back from Harry's hard fist. "It's not for you to question the general," the ragged administrator of the blow exclaimed. "It is not for you to be so lively," Riley returned angrily, giving the blow back with an added force. "Hear, hear!" broke in the first questioner. "Fisticuffs under my nose? No more of this. I command you both." To Harry, he added an extra caution. "Your zeal in my behalf will be better appreciated being less demonstrative. Blows should be struck only on the battlefield." To Riley, he added, with a slight smile hovering over his face, "My name is Washington. Perhaps you have heard of me." To this, Riley replied, "I have indeed, and heard of you very well spoken of too." Emboldened by the other's smile, he ventured another question. "I think my reckoning of the day in the year is badly at fault. An hour ago, I thought the day was Christmas Day. How far out of the way did my calculations take me, sir?" "This day is indeed Christmas Day, and the year is, as you must know, the year of our Lord 1777. Riley again pinched himself. "Why do you bring this man to me?" Washington now inquired, turning to Harry and his companions. "He is a spy, sir," said Harry. "That is a lie," Riley indignantly interpolated. "I have done nothing to warrant such a charge. We found him in the Widow Robin's house, pouring strong liquor down his throat. I had gone inside after information concerning the roads, which he was getting from a bottle, sir. If drinking from a bottle of necessity constitutes being a spy, I fear our camp is already a hotbed," Washington somewhat sagely remarked, casting his eye around shyly at his officers and men. "Tell me," he went on with sudden sternness, looking at Riley through and through, as though he was reading the very thoughts, "is the charge true? Do you come from Howe?" "The charge is not true, sir. I come from no one. I am simply making a tour of pleasure through this part of the country on my bicycle. With the country swarming with men of the two hostile armies, of any kind of tour, save a one absolute necessity, seems ill-timed. When I set out, I knew nothing of any armies. The fact is, sir—" Riley started making an explanation, but checked himself on realizing that telling of any improbable yarn would be increase the hazard of his position. "Well?" Washington intoned with questioning, growing suspicious. "I certainly did not know that your army or any army was quartered in this vicinity." Riley hesitated for lack of something further to say. "You see," he finally added, prompting a happy idea, "I rode my wheel from New York." "You have come from New York? Though it is hard to believe you came in that singular-looking machine a great distance. Where is that horse that drew that vehicle?" Riley touched the bicycle. "This is a horse, sir, just as it is. The vehicle," he said. "This man is crazy," Harry exclaimed. Washington only looked at incredulously he felt. At the same time, he asked a double question. "How can the thing be balanced without being upright by a pair of shafts and a horse's back, and how is the motor power acquired?" For an answer, Riley jumped upon the wheel, and at considerable speed, in a haphazard way, pedaled around the space within the hollow square of the soldiers. Hither and thither he went, at one second nearly wheeling over the toes in a line of astonished, if not frightened, militiamen. At next, bearing suddenly down on Harry and his companions, making them dance and jump almost out of alert, avoided a collision. Even the dignified Washington was once or twice put on the necessity of dodging hurriedly aside when his equilibrium was threatened. Riley eventually dismounted, doing so with assumed clumsiness, by stopping the wheel at Harry's back and falling over heavily against the soldier. Harry tumbled to the ground, but Riley dexterously landed on his feet. At once he began offering a profusion of apologies. "You did that by design," Harry shouted, jumping at his feet. His face was red with anger and shook his fist threateningly at the bicyclist. Washington commanded the man to hold his peace. Then to Riley he expressed a great surprise at his performance and a desire to know more about the bicycle. The young man thereupon described the machine minutely, lifting it in the air, spinning the wheels to illustrate how smoothly they rotated. "I can see it is possible to ride that contrivance with rapidity. It has been put together with wonderful ingenuity," Washington said, when Riley had replaced the wheel back to the ground. "And you, sir?" "It is but a toy," an officer spoke up. "Put our friend on his bundle of tin and race him against one of our horsemen and would make a sorrow showing." Riley smiled. "I bear the gentleman no ill will for his opinion," he said. "Still, I would like to show him the practical test of the subject, that is, ignorance of his own profound." "You would test the speed of a machine against that horse?" Washington said in amazement. "I would, sir. You have a good road yonder. With your permission and a worthy opponent, I would make the test at once." "But, sir, this man is a spy," Harry broke in. "Would it not be better to throw a rope around his neck and give him his deserts?" "The charge is by no means proven," Washington replied. "Nor can it be until a court-martial convenes this afternoon. I see no reason why we may not in meantime enjoy the unique contest which has been suggested. It will make a pleasant break in the routine of the camp." A murmur of approval went up from the masses of the men by whom they were surrounded. While they were talking, it seemed as though everyone in the camp, not already on the scene, had gathered together behind the square of infantry. "Then, sir," Harry said, with some eagerness, "I would like to be the man to ride the horse. There is no better animal than mine anywhere, and I understand his tricks and humors quite well enough to put him to his best pace." "I confess I have heard you speak well of your being a horseman," Washington said. "Be away with you. Saddle and bridle your horse at once." It was the chain of singular circumstances narrated above which brought John Riley into the most remarkable contest of his life. He had entered many bicycle races at one time or another, always with credit to himself and to the club whose colors he wore. And he had every expectation of making a good showing today. Yet a reflection of the weird conditions which had brought about the present contest took away some of his self-possession when, a few minutes later, he was marched over to the turnpike. He left to his own thoughts while the officers were pacing out 1 mile straight course down the road. After the measurements had been taken, 2 unbroken lines of soldiers were formed along the entire mile, a most evident precaution against Riley leaving the race course at any point to escape across the fields. Washington came up again, when the preparations were complete, to shake the hand and whisper a word or two of encouragement in his ear. Having performed these kindly acts, he left to take his position near the point of finish. The beginning of the course was located close to the battery of half-concealed field pieces. Riley was now conducted to his place. Shortly afterwards, Harry appeared on the horse. He leered at the bicyclist contemptuously and said something of sarcastic nature partially under his breath when the two lined up side by side for the start. These two slights, Riley paid no heed. He had a strong belief that when the race was over, he would be left in the mutton-like head of his opponent's very little of his present inclination towards the humorous. The soldier's mount was a handsome black mare, 14.5 hands high, strong of limbs and flanks, and animated by a spirit that kept her prancing around with continuous action. It must be admitted that the man rode very well. He guided the animal with ease and nonchalance when she reared and plunged, and kept her movements confined to an incredibly small piece of ground, considering her abundance of action. Keep to your side of the road throughout the race. I don't want to be collided with your big beast, Riley cautioned, while they were awaiting the signal at the starter. To this, Harry replied in some derision, I'll give you a good share of the road at the start, and then all of it and my dust too afterward. Then the officer who held his pistol fired a shot. Riley was well satisfied with the conditions under which the race was well made. The road was wide and level and smooth, hard and straight, and a strong breeze had sprung up and blew squarely against his back. His wheel was geared up to 84 inches. The breeze promised to be valuable adjacent to pushing it along. Awaiting the second and last signal, Riley glanced down at the two blue ranks of soldiers, which stretched away in the hazy lanes of the distance and convergence at the termination of the course, where a flag had been struck into the ground. The soldiers were at a parade rest. Their unceasing movements as they chattered to one another, turning their bodies this way and that, craning their heads forward to look at the starting point, then jerking them back, made the lines seem like they were long, squirming snakes. At the end of the course, a thick bunch of militiamen clogged the road and oversped into the fields. Crack! The signal went off. Riley shoved ahead of his fellow, who had been holding his wheel upright while astride of it, and pushing down on the pedals. The mare's hooves dug into the earth. Her great muscular legs straightened out. She sprang forward with a snort of apparent pleasure, taking the lead at the very start. Riley heard a shout of excitement along the two ranks of soldiers. He saw them waving their arms and hats as he went by. And along ahead, through the cloud of dust, there was visible the cloud shadow-like outlines of the snorting, galloping horse, whose hoof-beats sounded clear and sharp above the din which was from either side of the highway. The mare crept farther and farther ahead. Very soon, 100 feet or more, the road lay between her and the bicyclist. Harry turned in his saddle, and called out another sarcasm. I shall pass you soon. Just keep to your side of the road, Riley shouted, but a bit daunted by the way the race had commenced. His head was well down over the handlebars. His back had shaped up the upper portion of an immense egg. Up and down the legs moved faster and faster and faster yet. He went by the soldiers so rapidly that they only appeared to be two streaks of blurring color. Their sharp, rasping shouts sounded like the cracking of musketry. The cloud of dust blew against the cyclist's head, his mouth full into his mouth and throat. When he glanced ahead, he saw with some satisfaction that the mare was no longer increasing her lead. It soon became evident that he was slowly cutting down the advantages she had secured. Harry again turned his head, Shortly afterward, doubtless expecting to find his opponent hopelessly distanced by this time. Instead of this, Riley was alarmingly close upon him. The man ejaculated a sudden oath and lashed his animal furiously. Straining every nerve and sinew, the mare for a moment pushed further ahead. Then her pace slackened a bit, and Riley crept closer to her, closer and closer to her than before. Then his head was breast of her outstretched tail. Harry was lashing the mare and swearing at her unceasingly now. But she had spurted once and appeared to be incapable of again increasing her speed. In this way she had went on for some distance, Harry using his whip brutally, the mare desperately struggling to attain a greater pace, Riley hanging on with tenacity to her hind flanks, giving her up not an inch of ground. A mile is indeed a very short distance when traversed at such a pace. The Finnish flag was already a few hundred feet further. Riley realized at this time now to go on to the front. He gritted his teeth together with determination, bent his head down further towards the front of the wheel. Then his feet began to move so quickly that there was only a visible and indistinct blur at the sides of the crankshaft. At this very second, with a face marked with rage and hatred, Harry brought his horse suddenly across the road, and that part of which he had been warned to avoid. It was hard to tell what kept Riley from being run into and trampled underfoot. An attempt at backpedaling, a sudden twist of the handlebars, a lurch to one side that almost threw him off his seat. Then, in a fraction of a second, he was over on the other side of the road, pushing ahead of the mare almost through as though she was standing still. An outburst of alarm from the throats of the soldiers changed when they saw that Riley had not been injured, first into a shout of indignation at the dastardly attempt which had been made to run him down, then a roar of delight when the bicyclist abreasted the flag, a winner of the race by 20 feet. As he crossed the line, Riley caught a glimpse of Washington. He stood close to the flag and was waving his hat in the air with the enthusiasm of a schoolboy. Riley went down the road, slackening his speed as effectively as he could. But before it was possible to entirely stop his wheel's momentum, the noisy acclamations in his rear ceased with startling suddenness. He turned in his saddle and looked back, as sure as St. Peter had the road entirely to himself. There wasn't a soldier or a ghost of a soldier in sight. As soon as he turned his bicycle about and rode slowly back along the highway, now so singularly deserted, looking hither and thither in vain for some trace of the vanished army. Even the flag which had been struck in the ground at the end of the quarter-mile race, of course, was gone. The breeze had died out again, and the air was tranquil and warm. In the branches of a nearby tree, 2 sparrows chirped and twittered peacefully. Riley went back to the place of the camp had been. He found only open fields on one side of the road and a clump of woods on the other. He continued down a little hill up which Harry and his companions had brought him a few hours previously, followed the road on further, coming finally to the fork in which he had located the old farmhouse wherein he had been taken captive. The house was, as it had been, where it previously entered, falling apart from age and neglect. When he went inside, he found lying on the brick hearth in front of the fireplace a number of pieces of broken glass. The end. Those, I hope you enjoyed those. 3 final haunted tales to round out All Souls Night, November 3rd, 2025. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you had a little bit of fun like I did. Wrapping up a month of holiday, Halloween festivities from the show of Metropolis, Haunted Tales, Nosferatu last Friday. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, I appreciate you guys watching the show. It makes me feel good that you guys are enjoying the shows and the movies and the stories as much as I do sharing them with you. Don't forget, when you get a chance, like and subscribe. It helps us out 110%. I am Joel K. This is Accessibly Live, the book club reading room, every single Sunday night live here on Twitch and YouTube. And I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you. Before we go, we do, as we do every Thursday night and Sunday night, a final quote for the night. And this one, to round out the month. Grapes must be crushed to make wine. Diamonds form under pressure. Olives are pressed to release oil. Seeds grow in darkness. So whenever you feel crushed under pressure, pressed, or in darkness, you are in a powerful place of transformation. Trust the process. Grapes must be crushed to make wine. Diamonds form under pressure. Olives are pressed to release oil. Seeds grow in darkness. So when you feel crushed under pressure, pressed, or in darkness, you're in a powerful place of transformation. Trust the process. Always trust the process, guys. There is so much stuff going on out there nowadays. There's a lot of crazy people, a lot of hatred, a lot of stupid things, making everybody very stressed, very pressed. Seems to be crushing everyone down. It happens to me. It happens to a lot of you. With school starting for a lot of you, work, the holidays coming to bear, a stressful time for everybody. Don't forget you have people to talk to, friends and family, clergy, imams, anyone there you can talk to. They are there for you. Don't forget that. Don't forget also, we have got a new email coming. So if you guys want to write and say hi, you'll be able to do that. I am Joel K. This is Accessibly Live every single Sunday night here on the Book Club Reading Room. Voice is a little cracky right now, but I'm glad you guys were here to enjoy those last 3 tales. Next week, got something special, and I'll make the announcement on Thursday night's show. I'm going to get going. Take care, all. Be well, be safe, be kind. We will see you next week here on Accessibly Live, the Book Club Reading Room. Take care, you guys.